Sasha, welcome to the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast, brother. It's good to catch up again. We obviously connected a couple of years ago at Joe Dispenza's retreat, which I've spoken about at length on the podcast numerous times.
Nice.
Mate, I actually want to ask you about that. What was your biggest takeaway from the work that you've done with Joe? Because I know you actually went to one of his events prior to the one I met you at. What's been the biggest change in your life based off the work that you've learned from Joe?
What a question to start off with. The biggest change, I think that practice of like getting yourself into, I think it's probably two things. So it's like, number one, when you're going through any of his work and you're in that kind of state of meditation and you remove yourself from kind of like the material world, you really start to know the true version of you. And I think that's probably the biggest benefit. How that applies to anything in terms of like whether it's a business or a relationship or just like confidence about who you are as a person, that's probably the biggest thing where you're like, I'm completely okay with this individual and I know how this person is in silence, in darkness, in hours of meditation with no stimulus from the environment. And I'm like, I like this guy. You know what I mean? And there's a very like grounding, quiet confidence that comes with that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that if you're constantly distracting yourself with like things or stimulus or screens or whatever it might be, you ever meet that version of you. And people are probably scared of it. So I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest things, being like, I know the things that I'm terrified about. I know the things that I feel really good about, and I'm pretty familiar with it. You know, I'm like, yeah, dude, like that's a weak spot of yours. I've met that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's also my strength right here. And this is where you should really feed into. So I think that definitely self-awareness, absolutely big kind of like aha moments around being like, I'm okay with this version of me right now. I'm still building, but I'm like, right now I'm good. Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I love that. I always enjoy going kind of like not all the way back to the start, but kind of like going back to before, you know, you're doing what you're doing now. So let's say growing up, would the people around you, and including yourself actually, would anyone around you have been able to predict that you would be in a position you're in today based off, you know, who you were as a person back then in terms of like your values, your work ethic, the way that you went about everything that you did at that point in your life? Is it something that was always going to go in this trajectory, or was there a pivotal moment in your life where everything kind of changed?
No, I don't think so. I reflect on this as well because a lot of the people kind of comment on my like work ethic today.
Yep.
And I think back to like all the previous jobs and things that I had prior to owning my own business or anything, and I was lazy as hell. Like I would be like, my friends and I would go out partying and like, we would go into like the building that we were working in and the construction site, and we'd go into like the demolition levels that were being demolished, and we'd like just go and sleep for hours. Like, and then we'd be like set an alarm, and then like sometimes the managers would come and be like, what the hell are you doing in here? And like if I think back to, you know, when I was like through school, the key thing that I observed about my behavior is I always just did okay. Like it was like
did just enough.
Enough. That was it. And I think the reason for that was because when my mum and dad broke up, and I did a lot of work on this, so I'm pretty aware of what happened. Mum and dad broke up, and I kind of maybe my emotional intelligence, whatever it was, like picked up on the fact of like, all right, there's a lot of stuff happening in this environment, and I really love my mum, and I don't want her to leave, and so like I went into this kind of state. One of my mentors, he calls it like the fight, flee, and then fawn. If you know what it is, where it's kind of like you just become whatever the environment needs, right? And so it's like
continually adapting to what's around you.
Blend in. It's okay. She needs me to be happy. She needs me to clean the house. She needs me to look after my brothers and sisters. And so that comes at the cost of not knowing yourself.
Yep.
Right. And so you just all through school after that, when that happened, I remember just being like kind of like B plus student. Not an A. Fuck no. Like I'm like no, dude, that's too much. Don't over excel. I don't want to be called a nerd.
Yeah.
I was like, no, don't do that. And it's just like, but not like a bad student where the teachers were like, no, you're failing and stuff like that. So it was just good, just enough to get by kind of unseen. And so like, I don't think anybody could have been like, hard worker, intelligent. Yeah. It's like, no way. It's like the dude that was just like in the background, the shadow that no one really saw, that was like, oh, he's really introverted. He doesn't really talk too much. And are you just really shy? Like, do you talk at all? Yeah. Like that was literally like myself through school. Yeah.
Would you say that you worried a lot about other people's opinions?
Oh, massively. Because it's like in that state, my version of self would always be based on my assessment of the environment in terms of people around me. And then I would change based on that. And I would be like, oh, okay, like oh, time for Sasha to be a little bit more extroverted.
Yeah.
Time for Sasha to be like a little bit more quiet. You know what I mean? And so like every time, and I still notice this behavior myself currently in today where I'm like getting a lot better and better at it, but I'm really good in like a smaller environment when I'm like in maybe 2-3 people, because I can quickly assess and be like, all right, 2-3 people, let's behave like this. Big groups, lots of people, I sometimes take longer to kind of be like, okay, so where do I fit into this environment? This is the card to play. Let's go.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's very interesting. Very, very interesting.
100%.
Yeah.
If we shift a little bit now to the ecom side of stuff, obviously I'd be fucking crazy not to spend a good portion of today chatting to you about that. Do you still remember the very first sale you ever had through Shopify?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was in Sydney and I had launched some ads the night before, and I remember I was selling a $37 product, and I went to sleep and my heart was like racing. I was like spending money on ads, and I'm like, this is like a scam. I'm like, where's this money going? What's going to happen when I make a sale? Where does that money like go into? I'm like, I like the idea of doing something that wasn't working and then getting paid via like an invoice or a payment that gets paid into you. I was like, it's such a different paradigm, you know? And so I remember waking up in the morning and I checked my phone and I think I made 3 sales. It was like $120. And my heart was like racing. I was like, this is insane. This is like better than anything else.
Yeah.
Like that initial first feeling of like, I was asleep. Like I was sleeping right now, bro. Did you check your phone? You made $120.
Yeah.
Like it was wild, transformative. And it just completely flips the way that you think about money, flips the way you think about earning, flips the way you think about like the trade-off of like, you need to do this and then get paid. You know, it's such a powerful shift. Yeah.
And so at that point, was the decision, you know, all in from that point in terms of going down the ecom path? Or what did the next kind of few years look like?
It was very much kind of like, I was like, this is going to be, because I think what happened was I always kind of like observed the things that I was doing in terms of like, I remember when I had the job and I was working as like a construction foreman and I was like working up the ranks of this thing. I started, you know, becoming like a leading hand, and I was like, okay, this is okay. And I remember like the site manager that I was working with at the job site, he was like the guy that you'd become like. And it's like, okay, I can see like what he's doing. And I saw this guy and he was like, maybe like 40, maybe 42, probably looked like he was like 55, sunburnt, wrinkled, working like maybe 80 hours a week. And I was like, interesting. I'm like, this is you now, that's where you're going to be. And I was like, it kind of just became clear to me in terms of like, is the thing that you're working towards and chasing in this current environment, like it's like, they call it like, I guess the jockey, the horse, and then the track. And it's like, you know, the track that I was on was really bad.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so I was like looking at the track and I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know if I want to spend all the time on this track. And then so I think I took this leap into the hail damage repair business, that kind of space where I used to repair hail damaged cars. And that was the biggest shift initially, where it was like, probably not the biggest shift, but it was a big shift because it was like something whereby you work harder and you get paid more, but physical. Everything was physical. You work with your hands, you fix the cars, contractors come in, you have to travel around all around the world and go and find work and broker for work and get work, and then you fix the cars and you get paid. So I was like, interesting. I'm like, I kind of like the idea of this because if I work harder, that means I can make more money. And I was like, okay, first sense of being able to like control my income. And then I kind of, similar situation happened in that industry. I was about 2 years into that industry and I was like, right, I made really good money in the last kind of like 2 years that I was working there. I think probably about $1 million. And then I kind of started to analyze the track again. And I was like, all right, so where does this end? I'm like, you can spend 25 years here. In fact, the guy that is in that factory right next to me, he's been doing it for 25 years. Man, like that doesn't look good.
Yeah, and there's a ceiling.
And there's a ceiling, and it's like, and then the thing is as well, one thing that was painfully aware to me by working in that industry is that because of the nature of it, so you make money in that industry when it hails. Yep. And so your income is subject to external forces, forces of God coming and saying, now it's time for you to make money. And I was like, wow, this is incredibly risky. And so with my limited knowledge of business, I'm like, I want something that I can work on all the time. I want something that can be international all around the whole world. I want something that's not governed by the hours of, you know, the day when I can work, when I can be in a location. And I was like, it has to be something in this kind of digital e-commerce sector. And I'm like, that's where I really started to focus my attention. And the challenging thing, particularly from that shift, is that it was when I went from construction to the hail damage thing, it was very much an upwards tick. It was a big risk, but it was an upwards tick. And then so when I was in the hail damage thing, I had to go way back down again in terms of skill set. Everything was different, earning potential. I went from earning a lot of money to like, okay, you've really got to work and figure this out. And although the money of making money online is very different as far as like sales via e-commerce, it's still like I need to do a lot of sales to make back what I was making there. So it was a step almost backwards, which was really, really challenging as well. Yeah.
For context for the audience, and only obviously if you're comfortable to share, like, can you give the audience a rough estimate of like how much revenue you would think you've done in the e-com space?
So I probably at the moment, I've looked at across all of the companies, it's about $25 to $26 million since the last 6 years, last 5 years.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And
the majority of that's probably in the last 2 years.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. And the reason why I bring that up is we had Toby Pierce in here earlier. Obviously, the conversation was different than ecom, but one of the questions I asked him, and I was wanted to ask you as well, is what skill set or value do you hold really closely now that once upon a time at the beginning you never thought was going to be something that you would have to get good at?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I remember when I was at a Tony Robbins event and they did the whole values exercise.
Yeah.
And the thing that stood out the most for me from a value perspective was growth. And that's always been something that's been like paramount to everything else in terms of like, I'm always like, I want to grow. I want to continue learning. I want to develop myself. And I'm very obsessive in that respect. The skill set specifically that I probably wasn't very good with, and I think a lot of people are not very good with, that you just can't ignore, is like finance and everything to do with money. And so I think when I initially started business, like most people, you just go out and start making sales and you're like, oh, like I'll worry about that later. And then it's like, then later comes and then you're like, oh shit.
Fuck, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's very natural. I think a lot of entrepreneurs go through that phase, and I've seen a lot of like the founders that we work with start to make a lot of money, and then they're like, oh shit, like how much is GST? How much is tax? Where's that money going? Is that my profit, or is that like what's my profit? Like, dude, I've never told this before, but like when I first started looking at like a P&L, and I remember the first bookkeeper I worked with, she was like, okay, so like, you know, here's your P&L. And we looked at it, and I looked at the bottom number, and I was like, oh, like that's cool. We made 120 grand. And she's like, so in accounting, Sasha, so those brackets, that means it's a loss. And I was like, I just wanted to exit the Zoom. I was like, oh my God. Like it was like zero knowledge, you know what I mean? So I think that skill set in terms of, you will constantly run rings around people if you're able to math quickly and able to do simple calculations, and then also apply that into whether it's cash flow projections, whatever it needs to be. But it's like that financial acumen, especially in respect to all things business, scaling your business, profitability of your products, profitability of your people, capital allocation. It's like that is such a powerful skill that a lot of people simply just don't have.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, even on a different scale, like I was exactly the same, even starting my business outside of ecom, right? Like credit cards, tax, GST, fucking loans, everything. There was just no knowledge in that respect. And I look back now and I'm glad that, you know, all the shit show happened because it took so much away from it. But it's definitely something that if I had my time again, I would invest heavily into understanding it so much more than what I did. And with the ecom space, like, what is the question I've got is how much, or what was your ability to delegate early on? Were you someone who kind of took so much pride in like what you were building and the passion that you had, and then you got in the back of your mind like, fucking no one's going to be able to do this as well as me? Like, how did you navigate through that and being able to have the ability to delegate certain tasks or parts of the business that, or to people who are significantly better at you than doing it, and put your energy into the things that you really feel aligned with?
I think I've got a really, really good superpower in this space. So for myself personally, I did the opposite and I delegated too early and delegated without knowing enough to be able to make sure the person was doing the thing. And so like you get crap results and then you're like, oh, like, is that good or is that bad? And you don't know. And then the other thing that I have is my wife and the companies that she's built. So she's the opposite of me in terms of like hyper. I want to make sure everything's perfect. Never let go. Like I absolute like scrutinize every detail, and it's brilliant for her because she's hyper effective. But at the same time, it also is a cap for growth.
Yep.
So I've kind of got this perspective where my natural inclination when I started out was just like, oh, yep, cool, advertising agency, this, oh, yep, this person here, this person website, and then you've got all these people doing things for you, and then you're paying them, and you're like, what am I paying you for again? Another invoice, and I'm like, wait, what? And I think that probably comes down to like the finance aspect, because when you understand the finances, you're like, all right, all of that money I'm going to keep because I'm just going to do it. Right. Yep. And so I was just making these kinds of like plays and hiring these contractors and bringing people in. But I would say within that first like 12 months or 2 years, I saw my wife growing her business very quickly, but she was very efficiently doing everything. And it was great. It was insanely lean. It was insanely profitable. But I was like, like that's good. And this is probably not that good. Somewhere in the middle in terms of delegation and stuff like that. Because I think what I found is that it's always scary to let go of another layer.
Yep.
You know, like you reach the first level and initially it's just like your customer service has to be outsourced. And you're like, my customers love me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I love connecting with them in socials, and it gives you so much like satisfaction. You see all the remarks and the comments, everything they're sharing with you. You're like, this feels so good. It's a part of your significance when you build that brand, and then you hand that over, and you see like whether it's offshore people doing it, and you're like, oh no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say, and you want to jump back in there and like grab it and grip it and be like, no, give me the inbox. I'm going to do that. But then you're back into the details again, and you can't actually like strategically lead, the business. And I think that's probably a challenging play as well that keeps a lot of founders from growing, is because they don't delegate. All of their mental capacity is spent on solving small, tiny problems, and then no one's actually playing the strategy game of like, where's the business going? Yeah. So very, very important skill set to get good at.
Get stuck working in it instead of on it. Yeah.
And that's it. Like, it's always the thing where it's like, are you working on your business or in your business? And people are like, oh yeah, like work more on your business. Like, what does that actually mean? You know what I mean? And it's just like,
and you need to be in a position to be able to do that.
Correct, exactly. And I think it's hard because I have this example that I gave recently, like a close friend of mine. It's interesting because humans will always like defer back to the thing that they know how to do confidently when they're in times of like overwhelm, right? And the example I gave recently was like, close friend of mine, he had like a building company, and the building company was like having a lot of issues, and from a finance, a leadership, a kind of strategic level, he was like in over his head.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was like, I don't know what to fucking do. And it was very interesting because what he did was to build back that kind of confidence of like, I kind of know I'm good at something, is he went back onto the job sites and started working on the tools.
Yep.
Because it was like, I just got to do something, man.
Yeah.
I want to finish something today, because when I go home at night and I sit in my office and look at my cash flow, I have no idea what to do. And it's way too difficult.
Yeah, overwhelming.
So, correct. And so sometimes people get trapped because they don't actually delegate and give those things to other people who might be better, and they force themselves to be in that position where they're like, but it feels good for me to zero out my inbox. Or it feels good for me to whatever it might be and stay small. Yeah.
You mentioned your wife before. How is that dynamic in terms of from the professional side, the personal side, and how do you navigate that, right? Is there, you bringing work home with you both, how's the communication even in a work setting as well? Like, do you try and differentiate the two, or do you just kind of work well together? Because as you mentioned before, there's certain qualities or values that kind of just work well because they're almost the opposite in a sense.
We're very different in a lot of ways, but we're very similar in a lot of ways. And so if I fundamentally look at our relationship, I think that the one benefit that we have agreed on over years and years and years of being together is that I always push her to be better, and she always pushes me to be better. And so winding back to when we first ever started like dating, I remember like I was like working a job, I had $150,000 of debt, I was using drugs, and I met her dad, and I was like, you're a loser. Like, I felt like a loser. Like, I was like, you're a pathetic loser, and you're trying to date this girl. I can't even look at her dad in the eye and be like, I got your girl's back. I'm like, no, dude, you don't even got shit. And so I had to really like level myself up a lot in terms of the version that I wanted to become. And so I think through that exchange, we're constantly in a very supportive way, always like pushing each other to be better, where it's like, and my way of doing that is like my work ethic, the way that I conduct myself, my health, my eating, my habits, all of them are personal development. I do the learning. And then her way of doing that for me is like the standard that she almost like expects of me, and she challenges me to play bigger. She challenges me to play better. She challenges me to lead better, to be more fierce, to be more courageous. And so it's a challenging relationship, like that dynamic. There's a lot of fire and sparks, you know what I mean? Because I'm pulling this way and she's pulling this way, but we meet in the middle. And I think the strength that we build for each other is very much the ingredients that go into the continued growth we've had. And if I think the interesting thing, going back to Joe Dispenza at the start, so our relationship almost ended because, so what happened was I started doing a lot of this meditation stuff, right? And she was like initially very much like, you do that stuff and we're done. You know what I mean? Like, that's weird. Like, I don't want you to do it. That's very strange. And I was like, I really enjoy doing this stuff. Like, this is interesting. Makes me, I don't know what it is. It makes me feel good. And so I was, enrolled into this Joe Dispenza event and I'm like, I'm just going to buy you a ticket. You're going to come along. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'm not going to this dumb shit. I'm not doing it. And then so she's like, whatever. Okay. And then so we went to the event. First day we got there. The one decision we made, which was amazing, is that I'm going to go by myself and she's going to go by herself.
Okay.
So we had these unique experiences where it's not like, why are you doing that breath like that? What is that noise you're making? It was just like completely separate. No judgment, no inter kind of related connections. And it was very, very separate. And the first day, I think she was like kind of in that zone of like, what the hell is this stuff? Second day, if you remember, they bring those people on stage and then people do all the shaking and stuff. And she's like, this is a cult. Something's happening here.
I literally remember calling Danielle after that day and she's like, how was it? And what did today involve? I'm like, all right, it's going to sound like a cult. I'm like, just a warning, it's going to sound like a cult. I promise you it's not. I'm like, if you had seen it, you definitely would have think it was a cult. Right. But
so she saw that. And then I think the thing that she, somehow understood or she did was she's like, what's the worst that could happen? And she's like, fuck it, I'm here.
Yeah.
And then so she really lent into it and then she had all these like transformative experiences that really like opened her up to a lot of growth. I think since then it's just been this exchange where we're constantly like, forcing, challenging, pushing each other up in a way where a lot of our conversations orient around work. A lot of our conversations orient around like the things that we're doing in business. How can we improve each other? How can we improve what we're doing with our business and what we're doing with our community, with our products, with our services? I think I would say that the relationship itself feeds the business. Definitely. Like our relationship and the strength that we have together helps me to go harder in business. Like I always think back to it and I'm like, interesting. Like I feel so solid and sound in the platform that I have and this foundation that I have with her, where I know that like, it's never one of those, I've got your back, like, oh baby, don't worry. It's all good. It's okay. It's like, get back out there until you get what you want. It's that. And it's like, did you get it, dude?
And that's what I was just about to ask you is how do you navigate the candor side of things, like the ability to be able to tell each other what you actually need to hear and separate the love and the relationship side of things. But I mean, it's coming from a place of love anyway, obviously, right? But has there been challenging times with that?
Oh God, yeah. Like sometimes it will be, whether it's like, me just being like, I respect it that you're being direct with me, but I just need like a hug right now. And equally for her, it's like, sometimes like she'll be saying something about whether it's a complaint or something. And I'm like, think about it like this, do it like this. And she's like, I just want you to kind of care for me right now. Yeah. And I'm like, right, got it. Okay, let's take that hat off.
Yeah.
Well, let's just be caring, supporting, Sasha now. So it's definitely challenging. I think especially when you get really good at like a particular, whether it's like an identity or a version of you, it can get challenging to take that hat off. Yeah. You know what I mean? You start like really crushing it in like that D-type personality. You're getting what you want. You're leading people. It's like advance. And then it's like, okay, now I need to be soft and gentle. You know what I mean? And so
it becomes the identity and it's hard to shift.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What about for yourself around that? Is that something you and your girlfriend, wife, is it?
Fiance.
Yeah,
fiance. So we've been in business together now for just over 12 months, right? Nice. So we're kind of both co-founded Unify, and it's been great. I think we're still in that early stage, as we were discussing before we started the podcast today, where in terms of genuine business side of things, it's only really now starting to ramp up a little bit. I guess you could look at the first 12 months as, in a sense, winging it to an extent. But I love it. And I think the thing that I value the most out of it is being able to watch her progress in something or continue to upskill or do well in something, even with the challenges, but watching her navigate through it. And I guess the challenge at the moment is learning to be able to separate the two and not just always be there just with the pat on the back and being able to give the feedback and the advice when necessary, knowing that it's coming from a place of wanting her to develop and get better. And same for her to me. You know, and she's always been, even before we started Unify, she's always been an incredible supporter for me with my work and what I do and vice versa. And so, it's been incredible. Yeah,
amazing, dude.
For those that are watching or listening at the moment that are either early stages of launching their e-com brand or just it's just the idea, it's just the brainstorming phase at the moment, having worked with so many people and experienced so much of it yourself, what are you seeing at the moment in terms of people putting energy towards things that really just don't fucking matter yet?
Right, as far as like I'm allocating attention to this and it's just stupid.
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick example for myself. So before we even launched Unify, there was a 2 or 3 month period there where I was just a fucking nutcase based off like being overwhelmed with thinking of too much shit or focusing on the amount of things that needed to be done, which just weren't necessary yet anyway. And so putting a lot of energy into things that really didn't matter too much, but then kind of being so stuck in it that you're almost like a horse with blinkers and you're just not aware of any of the stuff outside of it. And so, I guess the question is, what are people putting too much time and energy into in the early stages, which could be better off spent somewhere else?
I think if I was to reverse the question and think about where their attention should be, I would say the main, and it was funny, I was actually going through this last night on a coaching call with some of our community. The main areas that I find to be like most impactful, assuming that you've got a product that's like profitable and it makes sense and it's like, okay, just taking that out of the equation and making sure you have something to sell, right? Assuming we've kind of landed there, I think the main kind of focus in terms of like what your attention should be on is just like, how do I drive traffic to my website and how do I get cheaper traffic to my website? Like if you keep it that simple and you're like, okay, and all things traffic, meaning like, how do I understand all the metrics relative to, ad funnels and understand all the things in the ads managers in terms of usually just meta to begin with. How do I understand these things and actually get what they mean? Because if you can control the traffic lever and then you have a good product to sell and then you can just obsess on the metrics of your site and you can obsess on the metrics of your traffic and you do nothing else. You don't even worry about your email marketing until you're making like $50,000 or $100,000 a month and you're like, oh, right, I guess I better set some of those things up. Like those are probably the core things just to do and really be like, focus on your ads, make sure they're good, make sure like they are converting damn well and your cost of traffic is cheap. Focus on your product, obviously make sure your product is good and it's profitable, you're not selling something at a loss. And then just like continue working those two levers. And then once you have consistency on your ad traffic and it's like, all right, we're getting traffic at good cost, it's working, it's coming through to my site, fantastic. I know that lever is pulled, if that makes sense. And then we're like, now we're on the website. Now what can I do on this website to take that conversion rate from 2% to 3%, 3%? And then you just work through the steps in terms of how can I optimize my product pages? What do I need to do to increase this conversion rate, whether it's like some heat mapping or something, but it's like, just do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just do that. And I think the example that I referenced last night, so some of the founders of that company, what's it called? The dishwasher sheets, the name escapes me right now. They scaled the company from like, it was like 0 to whatever it was, 100,000 in the first year. The second year was like up, whatever it was, 10 million or something. The third year was like 25 million. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. I'm like, what are the things that you did? Oh, we just created really good content. I was like, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. But people are like, oh yeah, I've got to do this influencer thing. There's a message about some special app that I should be using. It's like, no.
When you haven't even ticked off the fundamental basics first off.
Correct. Yeah. And the thing is as well, we drilled in really hard about this in terms of the content side. Like the ROI on really strong converting ads, it's the highest thing that never stops becoming the highest thing in your company. Like it's going to be the biggest ROI today, and then in 12 months it's still going to be, and then in 18 months it's still going to be the thing that if you have insanely good content that converts, like you can turn your business from like a 3x multiple to like an 8x multiple. I've done it many, many times where you push like a piece of creative live and you're like, right, so now we went from 3 to 8x. Changes the whole entire company.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, so how much can we scale now? And then so I always ask myself the question, I'm like, so if I can produce a piece of creative like that produces an 8x ROAS, for example, then everything else that I'm doing that's not that is a waste of 5x multiple.
Yeah.
Every time I'm producing 3x, you're losing 5x. And it's like when you start thinking like that, you're like, dude, why are you spending time on your logo design? Why are you spending your time writing on emails? Why are you spending your time posting random shit on like X or anything? It's like, just focus on that.
Focus on what's working.
Huge, huge. And it's challenging because there are a lot of things to do in your e-commerce business. And because it's all available to you, you've got the notifications, the widgets, the bangs, this. It's like, oh my God, like I've got to do all these things at once. And it's like, it can be like a scatterbrain, you know, and it's very easy for people to, I did it recently with one of my clients. We flew down to his warehouse and it was super funny. I'm like, okay, so like, and we listed out all the things that they were doing. And I'm like, this, and is this important? Yeah, we definitely need to do this. This project, yeah, we do this. With this, like 20 things on this board. I'm like, okay, cool. So if we do this thing in isolation, will it 10x your business? And the funny thing is they went through the list and they were like, kind of like, that probably would. Oh, that probably would too. And we went through a list and we filtered out maybe like 5 things. And I was like, all right, so you're telling me all of these things, guys, are going to 10x your company. Interesting. And then they saw the logic and they were like, all right, okay. But there's 3 of us. How the hell are we going to do all these things, right? And so we ended up narrowing this thing down to like the content / offer that you're creating. And it was like launching new products. And I was like, because they've had some similar products where their products have done like, as soon as they launch it, profitability goes through the roof. It's a hero product. And it's like every single time you're not selling that product and it's in stock, your whole business drops. So it's like you're losing $100,000 a month every single month. You can't get that product in stock and get it to people. And you're worried about some international expansion and you're worried about some influencers over here or some insurance company that you're going to do some collab with. I'm like, bro, do you understand you're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars? And so it's like, I think the key thing is that perspective shift. Like when people see it through that lens, they're like, oh, I didn't even think about it like that. Oh, I just thought that I was just, you know, reaching out to some influencers because everything was okay. It's like fun. There's another client of mine, hope you don't mind me going on a rant here.
Nah, go for it.
And super, super epic dude. And he launched a brand with our company. And so he did like a big organic kind of like launch, ran a whole bunch of like content, got lots and lots of like viral content, millions of views on his reels, launched it, immediately sold out in like 7 to 10 days. And he was like, oh, like this is pretty cool. And then it was like 3 months before he got stock back in again. And I was like, talking to him, I'm like, bro, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, it's just taking time. And I'm like, how much did you make in those first, 2 weeks? And he's like, oh, I think it was like 20, maybe 15,000 or something like that. I'm like, okay, so 2 weeks, 15,000, 1 month, 30,000. And so how long have you been out of stock? He's like, oh, about 2 months. I'm like, so that's $60,000. So you just missed out on $60,000 through these 2 months. And he's like, yeah, I guess. And I'm like, insane. You know, but it's like when people are in it, they don't have that perspective. And I guess that's probably the value and the power of having somebody who's like been ahead a little bit and they're like, that's an issue. Are you looking at this here? Hello. Yeah. Because it changes the game a lot.
It's almost putting too much of the focus on what we could be doing to increase it, but then not looking at what the cost of not doing the thing that did increase it is costing you, right?
I love Alex Hormozi says it really, really well. And ever since I heard this, I'm like, that is the best description of this I've ever heard. So it's like, what problems are you solving or what new opportunities? And so it's like there are problems right now that are actually going to cease your business from operating. If you're running ads that are not profitable, you are losing money. If you do that for long enough, you'll run out of money and you'll cease to operate. Right? And then there's new opportunities, which is like, oh no, we could do this influencer collaboration with somebody. And it's like the probability of that thing maybe working is like infinitesimally small, but it's like you could fix that ad and your business stops losing money, which is probably a lot easier and guaranteed. You know, I'm like, yes, like incredible. Yeah.
Where do you sit in the conversation around having to love the product or the space that you're in with the business that you're running? So particularly in an e-com space, like a founder starting a brand with a product that they are, fully aligned with and absolutely love the product and what it does, or looking at it from a perspective of like, this is just going to work and the margins are great and this is going to allow me to build a business.
Yeah, great conversation. And I like this a lot. My position on it is that like what you're passionate about doesn't matter in the fucking slightest. Like in perspective, so the brands that I have at the moment, I have a makeup brand. I don't wear makeup unless I have some skin issues or something, then I might wear makeup. I don't generally wear makeup, right? I don't need to use my product every day. I'm not passionate about it. I also have a brand that sells like fishing shirts, outdoor clothing. I don't wear those products at all. I don't use those products. I'm not passionate about that product.
Yep.
Additionally, years ago when I was like in my consulting firm, Ecom Capital, there was a whole period there where I was going through some really challenging times myself. And I was like, the business is the problem. Oh, like it's because I'm not passionate about it. That's why it's not going well. And it's like, no, bro, you just suck at business. Like that's actually the problem. And so I think that the thing that I've learned through that is that you get passionate about things that you are good at, right? The more, and so I think my kind of version of that is like, I love to focus on something for a long enough period of time until you start to see kind of like the results of the work that you're putting in. Then you notice that kind of like experience builds and you're like, okay, I'm not just like throwing spaghetti at the wall hoping something sticks. Like there's a bit of a strategy here. And then you start to like, and it turns on and it turns on and you're like, oh, this is great. I remember when I first started doing MMA, I walked into the fight gym and I was like terrified. I'm like, I don't want to get hit, man. I'm scared. Like I don't want to roll around on the ground with these guys. Like they look like animals. And then you do it like for like 3 months and I was like, oh, I kind of, in that one moment, I knew what I was doing for a second. I kind of like this now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just think passion comes through the thing when you continue to do the behavior and long enough to actually see some form of result. So that I think passion as a thing to seek and search for, load of shit. Absolutely don't pursue that. Waste of time. Yeah.
I tend to agree. Yeah, 100%. And so I want to come back to Ecom Capital for a second. Firstly, are you happy to run through kind of like what you guys do, just for those that are listening and watching with Ecom Capital?
Of course. Yeah. So what we do, we're a consulting firm and we do two main kind of things. One thing is we have like a growth incubator where we help startup founders to innovate new product ideas and bring those products to market. Essentially, that solves the problem of people thinking, what do I need to sell? Or like, what am I going to sell to start making money? And so we've got a really, really, really systematic process that we go through, methodology we've developed, and then account managers and people and experts that will go through and help you to validate ideas and run them through all of our models to be able to determine like the viability, the size of the market, all those good things so people can enter into a market with a little bit more confidence. We then have people usually graduate into this, but then we have more of like the growth division, which is essentially similar situation, people that are just like already launched, already scaling, and we just help them to grow and scale. So those are the two main components of what we do.
Okay, beautiful. And so this is kind of in alignment with the Ecom Capital stuff, maybe not, but at the moment, let's say over the last 12 months in particular, there's been a huge focus in content online, like let's say with people who have large audiences around personal brand, right? And so what I've noticed, and I kind of fell into this trap a little bit as well, is that you've got people now spending a shit ton of time on trying to build the personal brand, which is then taken away from the business that was making them the money because they think that the personal brand is going to make them more money. But kind of what we're saying before, it's like, what is spending this time over here actually costing you over here?
Correct.
And so I guess where do you kind of sit with that and how much time do you put into personal brand and what has your experience been in terms of what has happened with the business side of things as you've delegated more time to personal brand?
This is such a good conversation. Probably, I would say, what is it now? I would say almost 2 years ago. It was about March 2 years ago. I was like, prior to that, I was like continuously building my personal brand, posting very regularly, posting all the time. And the interesting thing that was happening during that moment is like my business, I wasn't really seeing the results that I wanted from my business. It wasn't really going that well. And I was noticing that my sense of, I guess, like significance, fulfillment was coming from, oh man, that's a sick piece of content. Oh bro, that was epic what you said in that video. That's really cool. And I felt like a fraud. Like I was like, like that's going bad. And those other companies are going bad. And then you're talking about this stuff. And then people are like, hell yeah, dude, you're a legend. And I'm like, this is bad. You know, so I actually completely cut it. And I just went complete like on everything. I'm like, I'm not posting on anything. I'm not doing anything in my podcast, nothing, zero. And I just focused on the thing that actually I needed to solve that problem. Because I was like, dude, you can continue, you know, trucking along at this kind of rate and focusing on your social media. I'm like, how much does your social media make you? Not very much. And you're spending a lot of time here that's just wasted time. So I think my position, I shot a bit of content around this recently, was just like the whole idea of like, build your personal brand. It's like, shoot all this content. It's like, if you're doing that and it's costing your business money, then it's just straight stupid. Like assuming that you have a well-run business that's like, you know, operationally sound and it's consistent and then you start, integrating that personal brand into it. I think that's a much more effective way to do it. But I see people and they're not really doing anything. Like they're genuinely like, they don't really even have a business, and they're getting on there and they're talking about business advice. And I'm like, bro, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And so I'm like, the personal brand thing is cool. And I think Hormozy and all these people that talk about it these days in terms of like, you must build a brand, document everything. I think people get so swept up in just doing that. And then they're just like, okay, well, I've been posting heaps of content for years now and I'm still broke. And I
think people also don't actually understand what size of personal brand you need in order to actually maximize your like to have an actual impact on your business that's worth even fucking talking about.
So true.
And so, like spending the 1-2 years on building a personal brand, and you're getting to a point where, it's great, it's better than what it was, but that's not going to automatically result in more money in your business. And
it's also like we were talking before about paid ads. So it's also like, if you look at like and this is, I guess, like just business fundamentals 101, when I'm always looking at like allocation of capital, it's like, okay, so how much am I going to put in and when am I going to get it back? Right. And so like personal brand, it's like, I'm going to put it in and it's an unknown timeline.
Yeah.
It just goes.
Yeah.
And you don't even know when you're going to get it back, if you will even get it back, if you're posting the right content to the right people for the right frequency, and then you stop doing it and it's all wasted.
Yeah.
Right. Versus you get really good at like paid ads, you put money in, and generally the cash conversion cycle is like 3 days.
Yeah.
And so you're getting money back 3x in 3 days. It's like,
or you're not, and you can see out of, and then you can change it.
Or you can change the strategy and adjust, but you have data in like 3 days time, as opposed to, man, I've been posting content on my Instagram for like, 6 months now and nothing's really changed. Oh, I better keep doing it. It's like,
yeah. I was having a conversation the other day on a coaching call with my clients around and I know you're into this type of stuff as well. So once you've gotten really, really clear on what your intention is, whether it's with your business, whether it's in your personal life, whatever it may be, and you've set that desire, the universe often shows up and puts challenges, or that are usually disguised as problems, in front of you, which is an opportunity for you to go to that next level of growth in whatever it is that you're wanting to work towards. What is that challenge or that opportunity for you currently right now, based off what your desires and intentions are, that you need to kind of move through in that state of non-resistance to kind of get through to that next level of growth?
Super good question. So I would say in terms of, I would say the current thing that I'm solving for at the moment is kind of like, it's a combination between like the assessment of the current kind of like, because like within Ecom Capital specifically, that's the main resource center that holds all of the talent that's able to kind of like deploy across other companies as well, right? And so like we've grown a lot in the last 2 years, and so the main challenge at the moment is like, so the people in the company, it's like they've got from there to here, but it's like where I want to go next requires a different level of play, right? And so I think the current thing that I'm solving for is like, okay, so how much of development of current talent and kind of like coaching and mentorship and taking amazing people to that next level with me, versus hiring ahead and bringing players in to help to show me the way that we need to actually go and save that time.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. And then I would also say, similar to what we discussed earlier as far as like the delegation or the stepping out of certain things, there's parts of my companies that I'm still really close gripped into.
Yep.
Right. And there's certain divisions and certain people and certain things that I still obsess on a lot. And I think that's probably the thing that I really need to strategically kind of like edge myself out of that situation to be able to, be more, like I mentioned, in terms of strategic thinking, looking at those plays and touching on the clarity thing, what you mentioned there. So we spoke about this a lot with Patrick at that mastermind last year. And so if you're down in the weeds all the time, you're never going to have clarity, right? If you're in the day-to-day of your business, you're never going to have clarity on the direction. It's like there's a whole bunch of you guys and you're in the forest and like you're all just running through the forest, and then like one person needs to climb to the top of the fucking tree and be like, guys, we need to go that way, right? And so like if you're in the forest all the time, you're just going to be looking at trees and you're like, man, like that looks the same as that tree. And so no one even knows where we're going.
Yeah.
And if you're the leader that's constantly in the trenches all the time, just like pushing and charging and pushing and charging and running in really fast and really hard, being busy, but you don't even know which way you're going. It's like, bro, who's steering the ship? Which way are we going? And so I think that's another thing for me. And we talked about clarity as far as if you're the leader, say for example, and you're really buried in the detail all the time, it's very difficult for you to, again, have that clarity to see where you're going. And clarity, it kind of dissipates through the levels of like leadership or management in your company. Say, for example, like you as a leader, you have like a level 6 out of 10 clarity, right? You're kind of like not 100% sure, but you're like, I think, maybe, probably we should maybe do this, that kind of language, right? Then you go and speak to your team, and then that clarity at a 6 level goes to like a 4, right? And then
trickling down.
Right? And then so the people that they lead, or maybe anyone below them, maybe it's your customers, they're all of a sudden getting led out of a 4 out of 10 person, and they're a 2.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there like, oh yeah, the product, I don't really know if I like it. Or is it, this is an average service. Because of clarity, right? Even in your family, same thing. You're the person who leads the household, and then you as a father figure or whoever it is in your household, you're a 6. Your wife, what? She's going to be a 4. Your kids, what? They're going to be a 2. Confused about life. Where am I going to go, Dad? I have no direction.
Yep.
So it's like it's the founder's job to be as clear as they possibly can be in terms of what's that direction, where are we going? Like being able to call the shots and captain's call, one of my mentors says. It's like someone has to be the one to say, we are fucking doing that.
Yeah.
And it's like it wants to be a good decision.
100%.
You know?
You mentioned PBD just then, Patrick Bet David, for those who don't know who Patrick is, if you're living under a fucking rock. What's been the biggest takeaway that you've taken from spending time with him and just watching the way that he operates, or even just kind of learning from underneath him?
So biggest takeaway, I think the thing that I noticed the most when I was over in his offices recently was just, so there's mentors that you have through like your life and your business that it's like you listen to them, and there's certain parts of them and their character or maybe their business, their personality that you kind of just like ignore. It's like, yeah, I like all of those things that you say, but those not so much, you know? And so for the first time when I was with him and that group of people and the group of entrepreneurs, like the conversations were world domination, right? How can we build billion-dollar businesses? It was in the next sentence, like my daughter, and she's on the bed and I'm crying because I'm like looking how beautiful she is, and like she's falling asleep on me, and then like she's tickling my arm and I'm melting. And then it's God, and then it's spirituality, and back to billion-dollar businesses, right? And so it's like the amount of like well-rounded, and then it's like obviously everything to do with like relationship, his wife. Dude, I'm like, there is not a piece missing. Yeah. You know, and so I think that in terms of seeing and witnessing that from like number one, it's possible, and to have that level of completion as far as like, it doesn't need to be all sacrifice, all finance, or all sacrifice and at all costs, at the cost of this, this, and this. I think that was a huge takeaway. And then second to that, I would just say like the way that the guy operates from the perspective of standards that he holds people to. Like, so we had this, like, this was actually not at the event, but this was probably a month prior. We had this coaching call, jumped on the coaching call, and every single time you get on a coaching call with him, there's like a book you have to read. You have to then go through the book report and go through all your learnings from the book, the main takeaways, examples, real life situations that you've observed. Very, very, very comprehensive. It's like, you don't mess around. Yeah. And so we jump on, there's about 6 other founders on there, and this one guy's like, he's like, all right, whatever his name was, one or something. And he's like, oh, you're up, tell me your book report. And he was like stumbling and a little bit stuttering. And he's like, stop. Did you read the book? And he's like, oh, did you read the book? Like hard out. And I'm like, and number one, like part of your mind goes, hey dude, it's just a book. But it's like, it is just a book. It's the standard. It is just a book. Yeah. So why the fuck didn't you read it? Yeah. Right? And so in front of everyone, he's like, why did you join this mastermind? Why did you do this? And he's like, well, because I want to get results and I want to be held accountable. And he's like, you need to make a decision. You either don't show up to these calls or you commit and you read these books. What is it going to be? And I was like, man, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh yeah, that's okay. And the hurricanes or the tornadoes and stuff that's been, oh, it's all good. Don't worry about it. And Patrick's like, number one, thank you so much for sharing and being honest. Not a lot of people would do that. Number two, I'm a very busy guy. Yeah. So it's hard for me to accept an excuse like I got busy. You understand? Yeah. He's like, so what's it going to be? And I was like, yeah. Just that level of accountability that he holds himself to, and people just step up to around him. It's very, very impressive. Very super impressive. Yeah. Seeing the standard, and it's just like, hold the fucking line. Yeah. Incredible.
What when we think about let's say the personal development side of things, right? Because I know we've touched on the Joe Dispenza stuff and whatnot. Like at some point when you become a dad, right? We were talking about that before, yeah, which is super exciting. Based off the lessons that you have learned, or we could call them mindset shifts, or just the law of exposure to things that once weren't normal that now have kind of made a big impact on your life. I often think about my journey through self-improvement and personal development, and think back to, although I'm very grateful for a lot of the shit experiences, obviously, I think back to if I had these tools that I have available to me now and the understandings that I do, the way I would have been able to navigate through certain things would be vastly different. And so, even for us now starting to think about having kids as well, it almost gets exciting thinking about being able to relay this onto them and be really conscious and aware of what beliefs am I creating in this child, right? Based off my behavior, and not necessarily just what I'm telling them, but just the way that I am being and the way that I'm acting. Does that excite you? And is there anything that really stands out to you that you feel like you can have a really positive impact on your kid's life by being able to, I guess, teach them some of the stuff that you've learned over the years?
Absolutely. My wife and I talk about this a lot, and I always, I think the thing that I defer to a lot is role model as opposed to anything else. Because like, if I look at, for example, like my childhood, my parents like told me a lot of things, and they were sharing their opinions about a lot of things, but the thing that I looked at or followed the most was just what they did, right? And so like if I look at, the observations from my childhood, it was like lots of scarcity, working really hard but not having much to show for it. And so that just was like, well, that's just, I guess, what people do.
Yep.
And so that's what I did. And so I think the thing that excites me the most about having children is being able to be like, I'm going to be the best fucking role model for my kids possible, right? My son, when we have a son, or my daughter, when we have a daughter, it's like they will look at, myself and my wife and our relationship, everything amongst the two of us as like, that's the example, and I think for me, that's the most important thing that I'm constantly like pegging as the standard. Obviously, like all the things in terms of the way that you can use different like tools and belief systems and things like that, super important. But the thing that I always observed more than anything else, my dad working really hard, having nothing. I was like, this is okay. Well, I guess that's normal. It's like, no, it's not normal, right? It's just you're doing the wrong thing, and you're working really hard in the wrong thing. So I think from a childhood perspective and raising children, I think that excites me tremendously. I wouldn't say nervous, maybe a little bit nervous about just the demands on capacity. I know just extra demands being like, now you need to spend more time with children. But I'm very, at the same time, very excited for that challenge that it's going to kind of bring in, because thinking about it like logically, it's just like, well, that's going to be extra time, but it's like your whole shift in terms of the way you think about, looking after another human being. It's like, it'll change completely.
Your own human being too.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to change a lot. So I think that's the thing that excites me the most. And I think from what inspires me a lot at the moment is definitely that. I'm just like, I really want to be able to be the parent, be the dad that is like such a fantastic role model in all of my incompleteness and all of my, things that I'm bad at. I'm like, this is the best way to kind of live life based on my perspective. That's kind of what I'm working towards. Yeah.
That's incredible. Great. Yeah. That's an awesome answer, man. What has been, just on the topic of beliefs, just quickly.
Yeah.
Is there a belief that stands out to you that's been extremely significant to let go of or reframe in business that has then led to exponential growth or an area of growth within your company, or just your ability to continue to grow and build within business?
Yes, absolutely. This is an epic question. So if I think back to some of the first initial business relationships that I had, they were very much based on, and this is prior to me doing probably a lot more of the personal development work than I have, but it was kind of like based on, all right, well, I'm not good at these skills. I'm not good at, for example, like marketing or advertising in finance. And so it's almost like when you bring someone into your environment and you have like, whether it's a business partner or someone you're working with, and then you trust in their abilities and you think the things that they do are like really complicated and really challenging. And you're like, oh, like, I don't even worry about those things. Like, they're way too difficult. They're way too challenging. I'm just going to focus on what I'm good at. And that's good when it works. But when it's bad is when you don't even understand it, and then something's happening where you're getting taken advantage of. And most of the time, from what I've found, is that a lot of those things that you're scared of, when you actually pull the cover off, you're like, oh, okay, like I'll just figure it out.
Yep.
And so I think that's probably the biggest thing. A lot of those things that you might be avoiding, or things that you're like, oh, like I'm really not good at finance, or I'm really not good at like running ads, or I'm really not good at creating content. It's like, if you actually just sat down and looked at the fundamentals of what's included in an ad account, or like a P&L, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement, and you like spend some time and watch like 10 YouTube videos, you'd probably be like, oh, I think I can get it. And I think that's probably one of the biggest beliefs that keeps people so stuck is the idea that, oh, this is going to be a monumental amount of work. Oh, the idea of me learning my cash flow. Oh my God. The idea of me running ads. I better just find another agency. I better find someone else to do it for me. And then you do that rather than just like sitting down for like 8 hours and being like,
doing the reps.
I think I got it. Yeah. It might not be as good, but I think I got it. And the amount of liberation you have from a control perspective, because you're like, I know how to do that. And it's also like, you can't take that from me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I'm not afraid of you doing that particular job for me, because at any moment I'm like, look, you're not working, bye. I'm going to do it myself now, if you need to as well. So it's insanely liberating. I think a lot of people get stuck because whether they outsource, whether they think about certain things that I'm not good at, and they put that belief into that for too long, rather than just being like, all right, how hard can it be? Let's just get into it and do it. And then you spend a little bit of time and you're like, I'm not an expert, but I'm a lot better than most people.
Yeah, and
I think you can get such an edge by just doing that, having that bias for action.
I on that topic, the question, like the very simple question that helped me so much with that is, why the fuck would I be good at it? You know, particularly with those things that I was getting overwhelmed with. So let's say ads. Ads are a good example.
Great example.
I was like, yeah, fuck, you know, shit, there's no way I'm going to have to get someone to do it. I'm like, it's too overwhelming. I'm like, let's not even bother starting it yet, because it's just a shit show. I don't know how it's going to work. And I was just like, why the fuck would I be good at it? Like I've never learnt it. I've never tried to learn it. I've never spent time practicing it. I've never spent time in an ad account just understanding things. And so similar to what you're saying, it was like, okay, let's invest time.
It's like, why do I expect myself to be good at it? It's like,
exactly. It's wild. I had this conversation with a client the other day. It was like, they're in this super low frequency and so much resistance around things not being perfect. I'm like, I said to her, I was like, I asked her if she could skateboard, right? The answer was no, which is probably going to be quite common. And I was like, all right, if I picked you up and took you to a skate park and said, here's a skateboard, here's a helmet, go in the half pipe and see how you go. I was like, would you expect to be good? She's like, fuck no. I said, all right, well, if you jumped in and you were shit, when we left, would you be disappointed? She's like, no, I wouldn't expect to be good. Yeah. I'm like, well, it's exactly the same as what we're talking about here. It's getting those reps in and just actually understanding it. And before you actually just write yourself off too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I was finding myself doing, is going like, oh, you know, I just don't do that. I don't know how to do that. And so I was like, well, have you tried to learn how to do it? But
I think the hard thing is as well is like, as you get better at a few certain skills, you need to reset again and go back to zero, if that makes sense. And like when you get kind of good at some things, you might kind of like hold on to them. It's like, this is what I'm good at. But then these few things over here are holding you back from growth. Yes. And you don't want to like reset back and be the kid at the bottom of the skate bowl being like, oh man, I'm really bad at this thing. Because you've got a few things like your cards that you just keep playing, and it's like, all right, bro, you're a one-trick pony. You got to do something else. Yeah.
What has been the biggest lesson that you've taken from failure, from a setback, right? Within business, we're talking in business language in this instance. So, is there a specific setback or failure within the business, or just a challenge that has then led to a really significant amount of growth?
Specific setback. I think, man, there's been so many failures. Like, I had this interview with my social team. When was it? Like, maybe like six months ago or something. And they were like, tell us all of the challenges and the hard things that you've been through with your business. And I was like, talking, what motivates you, what drives you? It was like challenges and hardship and getting through challenges and hardship. And they were like, tell us about some of like the happy times or some of the biggest successes. And I was like, I was like, hold on a second, like surely there's something, you know, but I think for me, I really enjoy, not in the moment, certainly not in the moment, but I think majority of the lessons and the learnings, they come from that suffering. I love what Ray Dalio says. He says, when you're young, you should fail as often and as big as possible without wiping out.
Yeah, because
that's where you learn. You know, and so I think probably failure specifically. I'm trying to think of any particular actual like trusting people that I shouldn't have trusted, investing money into things that just like were never going to work. I think if I fundamentally break it down to some of the biggest like overarching failures is like me not believing in myself enough. Like I would say that would probably benchmark as one of the biggest things. And then because of that, you don't take control, you don't make decisions, you kind of like stagnate and you stay where you are. And so I think one thing that I've kind of got into the habit of doing is just like sometimes like a wrong decision is better than no decision. And so if you're in a stagnant situation and you're like, oh, I just don't know, it's just like, just move.
Yeah, because either way, you're going to find out whether you're heading in the right direction or not.
You get some clarity. Data and you get something back and you're like, I think this is actually good. One book in terms of just a philosophy or a mindset that really helped my perspective around like growth was that 10X is easier than 2X. I don't know if you've read that book. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And they talk about how it's actually a lot easier to plan or think 10X than it is 2X. It was really interesting because at the time I was reading the book, before I read it, my lawyer, he's like, you should read this book. It's fantastic. I'm like, what's it called? And he's like, 10X is easier than 2X. And I was like working like 80 hours a week or something. And I'm like, bro, I don't need a 10X anymore. I'm like, I got no more time to 10X.
No hours left, brother.
And he's like, no. It's very important. Like you need to listen to it. And I started listening to it. And it's all about just like, if you were to 10X, like what would need to be true if that was to actually happen. And so I remember I was in this thinking, and I was very like in this scarcity-based thinking. I was like, how could I cut a few costs, and how could I like, lean things out a little bit more? How could I maybe fire that person and get a contractor instead? It was very scarcity limited based thinking. And I kind of read this book and went through it, and I was like, okay, so in 1 year from today, how much would you like to be making personally, personal income yourself every single month? And I was like, and immediately even like your whole body, you start to look up rather than down, you know what I mean? Like you're expanding. And I was like, oh, interesting, this feels a little bit different. And I was like, wow, I feel like I have more energy. And I like put this crazy big number, and I was like, okay, so is that impossible? And I'm like, that seems completely impossible. 10X what I'm doing right now. And I was like, it would be impossible unless. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that and that and that. And I was like, any other time that you spend doing anything except for those three things, I'm like, it's a waste of time. Yeah. And I think within like the next maybe 6 months, I think we 3-4x the company like so quickly, simply through some of those big shifts in terms of like, where do you want to go? That big think is so inspiring, and it's so like, it creates so much energy, and people want to follow that as opposed to like, cutting and looking at ways to live in scarcity. So I think my biggest failure is probably not trusting enough into that source energy, maybe that God energy, that version of me that I'm like, you got this, dude. Yeah. You got this. And leaning way into that scarcity and that fear-based mindset. Yeah.
Brilliant, man. Mate, before we wrap this up, where do you see the e-com space going over the next few years?
Great question. Timeline, a few years, what time frame?
Let's go 3 years, the next 3 years.
I mean, I think the room for growth in the e-commerce space is huge at the moment. And I think some of the things in terms of personalization from a shopping experience are only going to accelerate. Some of my close friends, they have very interesting technologies that help to personalize the whole entire shopping experience for people. I think people are going to want to get things that are specifically what they want in shorter and shorter amounts of time. I think quality and the product that you're able to develop is going to become more and more important. The brand that you're able to build is going to become more important. In terms of, I guess, I mean, it's such a space where it's like there is so much more growth there. Like everything that I order is just about online these days. Yeah, like it's expanding so much. There's so much more kind of activity. The one thing that I'm curious to see how it plays out is definitely Amazon operating at the same level as Amazon does in Australia, in America. Like the way they play in America is very, very, very aggressive, and they really own a lot of that market. I ordered a whole bunch of books the other day from Amazon in Australia, and I ordered on Saturday evening, and it came Monday morning, and I was like, that's impressive. Yeah. Like that's fast. Yeah. And so I think that's very interesting, and I think it goes back into like the brand and people being able to create really meaningful, specific products that are built around problems. And I think in terms of like what's going to set people up for success in the e-commerce space in the future is like the quality of the problem that you solve with your product. Yeah. I think that really comes down to the biggest thing. Like people and founders that are putting lipstick on a pig and trying to sell something that's just like average, you're going to get kind of like, it's like when the water goes out, you see who's, naked kind of thing. It's like, it's going to happen. Right. And so like, it's going to be very interesting because I think it's going to become more competitive.
Yep.
People are going to want to buy more from people. And I think that the personality based selling, as far as like authenticity, connecting as the founder into, the people that you're actually selling to, more and more and more of that is becoming prominent from all the brands that I see, all the brands that I buy from. It's like, we want to trust the individual that we're actually purchasing from. And I think the idea that you as the founder get to like hide behind the scenes and just be like, hello, our company will get back to you soon. And it's just you. It's just like, talk like you. People want to be like, hey, what's up? It's just Sasha. Like, it's just me here. You know what I mean? I think more and more and more of that, if you can be okay with that and lean into that trend of like personalization, being authentic as yourself in all of your flaws. Because that's the thing. It's like, hey, I'm just starting. This is my garage. This is my bedroom. Like, I've got my label printer. I just figured out how to use it yesterday. Like, guys, I'd love if you put in an order of my product. Like, please help me.
Just full authenticity.
And it's like, it's so real and it's so raw. There's a brand my wife follows and I can't recall her name. And she sells this like lip gloss thing. And she's like grown this company and it's like her and her family over in America. And they're like, in their little home and house, and then it goes to the next house and the next house, and she documents the whole thing, and it's like the sweetest story ever, and you just like are cheering for her to win. It's like more of that is going to become so rich, especially in like Shopify-based brand building e-commerce. I think that's where a real big trend is. And then content. I'm very, very excited for what's going to happen in the AI sector in terms of like how things are going to revolutionize the industry further and further. The one thing I think AI is doing to the e-commerce space at the moment is it's making it easier for, there's another founder that I know that does something similar to this, whereby, so he has a print on demand art business, right? And so like people will place an order for his art products that he generates images via AI, sells it with AI based images. Then as soon as an order is placed, the design is like spat onto a 3D printer that is an AI designed image, spits it onto that. The whole process in terms of like the delivery is in some like print on demand factory. It doesn't touch anything, right? All of his support systems are all chat based AIs. And so he's like one dude that's doing the job of maybe like 3 or 4 people. Company does $200,000 a month. Profit margins are crazy. And it's like, that was never possible. You know what I mean? That used to need to be content created for ads, right? Like design on the design for the actual like, painting itself. Print it, send it to the printer, then ship it, then CS. And it's like all of that's been removed. And so the power that you have to move quickly is like, it's getting better and better and better. Those are some of my initial predictions.
I love it,
very
man.
Exciting.
It's very exciting. Well, Sasha, mate, I really appreciate your time today, man. I'm super glad that we connected a couple of years ago at Joe's event. It's a synchronicity, right? Synchronicity. And here we are today. But really, really enjoyed following your journey since then, man. It's been so good to see your growth and just grateful to spend some time with you today and for you to share your value with the audience. So thank you very much, man.
Appreciate it heaps. Thank you.
Awesome, bro. That was great.
Epic.